When it comes to event promos and prizes, there are generally two ways that games can go: special treatments of existing game pieces or completely new and unique game pieces. Flesh and Blood has always skewed towards special treatments, cold foils, gold foils, and stuff like that. This has ensured that the competitive formats don't get any game-related advantage for top performers versus the rest of us. But in its casual and social formats, LSS has and continues to release new and unique game pieces. So today I'm joined by none other than the charismatic SloopDoop to discuss this practice and how it applies to Flesh and Blood. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Dice Commando and a very special Go Again, a fabulous cast. Today we are talking unique gameplay pieces as promos or prizes or whatnot for attending events, and joining me for the discussion is someone who's no slouch and no stranger to the YouTube world, the charismatic SloopDoop. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic. How are you?
Doing well. I went 3-1 last night at my armory with Bravo, bringing him back into the fold.
That's good. I went 0-3 with Hatchet Story, so you're doing a bit better than me.
0-3 with Hatchet Story. Yeah, you sound about
0-3.
like my. I'm a Dorinthea player. I don't know if you know that, but I've kind of left her on the sidelines lately. I'm really struggling with her right now. So.
Yeah, she is. She's not in a great spot. I also the deck wasn't very good. I threw it together and just went and played it, and kind of learned a few things.
Yeah, last night actually I was talking with somebody afterwards, and they were talking about the different weapon types, and I explained why Courage of Bladehold works only on swords, right? And I think that's a big deal, I think, for those axes, but eventually Cleave will be good, I think, eventually.
1 for 4 for a pump is actually good because second swing has to be on your second weapon, so at least Cleave does it anywhere.
Yeah. Right now, the majority of people watching this right now already know who you are, but real quick, could you just give us a quick summary of who you are, what you do, and where people can find you?
Sure, yeah. My real name is Wes, but I go by SloopDoop on YouTube. You can just call me Sloop. That's what most people do. That's like the channel that I run. It is a Flesh and Blood channel that is mostly for foreign franchise players, but I also have a focus on new players and like more casual fans of the game, trying to give them a space to get into the game for. So that's usually what I try to do, is just try and bring people here and give them some, well-produced entertainment.
Well produced, I think, is an understatement. That's why I remember one of the first ones I saw from you were back in the Froggy days. You were doing the James White in a Speedo spoiler. That video,
Yeah.
I will link that video up here somewhere in like one of the tags. That video's freaking hilarious. So that was well done.
I appreciate that.
Right. Well, so I have a bit of experience in one game, Argent Saga, where they did event-specific promos. So if you were to attend the event, you would get a promo card. And if you were to win the event, you could get, top 8, or win the event, you could get another promo card. And those promo cards were unique to the game, meaning that you could only have gotten them by going to that event, right? Whereas in Flesh and Blood, when you go win an event, you get a gold foil or an extended art something, right? A different treatment of an existing game piece. So I'm curious, with your background in your games, what games you've seen that have done both sides, and then I wanted to talk a bit tonight about the advantages and disadvantages of that.
Well, when it comes to like exclusive ways to get certain cards, obviously, like you had said, Flesh and Blood is doing where you get your promos and they're of existing cards for the most part. There are some more unique ones, but those are usually more casual cards. So it's just like a fancier version, something that exists. But with other games you can only get them this way. I don't have a ton of experience with super version exclusives. I guess you could count Magic the Gathering Secret Lairs when they started printing specific new cards, like mechanically unique cards in the Secret Lairs, as well as I know back in the day with Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, this was before my time, but there was a card called Mechanical Chaser, I believe it was, and it was only available in tournament packs, and this is back in the early 2000s, and it was like a $200 card at the time because there was only one specific way to get it, and it was just having 50 more attack than every other level 4 monster just made it so much better because it just got over all the other ones. So it was like a must run. I do think I do think that what FaB's doing is the more correct way rather than making mechanically unique competitive cards. And they're just giving us rarer versions of already existing cards is the way to do it because I just I don't think it's very fair to say, oh, if you didn't have the money or the ability to go to this event, you just miss out on a card that you like need to win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so to your point though, the Flesh and Blood, we have seen us more so for judge prizes. I bet for like going to worlds and stuff like that, we have seen unique game pieces in the let's call it here the social format, right, instead of casual format, because I don't personally like calling it casual because there's a lot of people who play casual, real Flesh and Blood, quote unquote, right? But how do you think that fits in and affects the potential future of Flesh and Blood, of having those particular like Taipanis and such like that? How do you feel that fits into attracting more players or potentially not in the social gaming side of things?
So for the social, I understand the feeling of not being able to have these promos. Like I don't have, for instance, a hummingbird. I don't own a Yorick. I do have a Call to Adventure, which is weirdly enough the most expensive out of the three because I did go to Worlds. But I do have a Taipanis, but like I don't have a Therian, and they are available. I'd say for hero promos, you could argue that, 150 bucks is way too much to pay for a hero card, and that's, a whole other discussion. But it's not that they're completely inaccessible, although give it a couple of years and they will be because there just won't be copies on the market and they'll be way too expensive. But I think for social formats, that's actually probably a better way to put it because I do play UPF, but I'm a more serious Flesh and Blood player. I think it's just going to come down to a circumstance of, you're just going to have to accept that you're not going to have everything. As much as it sucks to be able to not have every card you want, if you're just playing in these social games like Ultimate Pit Fight, I'm sure that if you really wanted to play Taipanis or you really wanted to play Yorick or something, most people would probably be fine if you proxied it if you didn't own one because it's just the hero. So for me, as long as it's not going to be competitively unique cards that are in the actual genuine official formats of Flesh and Blood, then I think it's perfectly fine. Because again, you could just proxy, especially if it's heroes and weapons. Most people aren't going to care at all.
Yeah. I mean, the proxy thing in a social format is actually a very fair point. So by and large, there's really two advantages or disadvantages, I suppose, to doing it either way, right? I mean, the first is that if Flesh and Blood, let's say, was giving away these unique promos that were game legal, and by that I mean competitive format legal, there would be extra incentive for people to travel, right? Like let's say you went to Worlds and instead of Yorick being just Yorick, actually it was Tales of Adventure actually at Worlds, right? Yeah. So instead of going there and getting Tales of Adventure, you got some card that was actually competitively legal. There would be a lot more incentive to travel, and or it would reward those folks who traveled because they would then have a valuable card that they could sell. The obvious disadvantage is that the rest of the population is at a disadvantage there. I think that one's pretty clear, right? So how do you think you balance those two in a competitive format game, or can you balance it in a competitive format game?
Honestly, I think so. The thing about trading card games, especially a competitive game like FaB, right now we're seeing the play base expand, and a big topic that's come back up is the price of cards because everything's just going up. Because especially since Japan has started to really pick up the game, they go crazy for trading card games, so they're just buying cards all over the world because their own market is still building. And so we're seeing the prices are already getting to a point where it is starting to gatekeep even the average person who normally could afford card games. Because I think Tunic right now, Rainbow Foil is like $400 or $500 Canadian. And the next cheapest version is like 300. And it's like that's a lot for a card. Like, 150 I think is okay. 300 is a huge asking price. And so I think if LSS was to start creating mechanically unique competitive cards that said not only like is the game already asking a lot from you, but now if you want to get access to this card that you might need, let's say it's a better Command and Conquer, or even if it's like a Command and Conquer equivalent, it's like if that becomes a meta played card, then you literally just say all of a sudden to all these players, oh, you just don't get access to it. Actually, Pokemon's a really good example of this. I just thought of this. I believe the card was called Tropical Beach. It was I think it was a Worlds exclusive promo, or it was like high up events, so like Pro Tour Worlds level events. If you won them, you got a card called Tropical Beach. And in the expanded format, not the standard, but expanded, it was like Pokemon's version of Modern, essentially, for Magic. Um, you could play it, and every best deck wanted to play it because it was a really good card. And it was like, I think at the time, like close to $1,000 for a copy. So like if you wanted to play competitive Pokemon in the expanded format, you needed to drop $1,000 on a single card. Now, obviously, we have the Fableds, which arguably are, kind of those, and that's a whole other problem in and of itself. But I think it's just better to avoid that, to be honest. I think it's
Mhm.
better to avoid mechanically unique cards because there's not going to be very many of them, and it's basically saying, hey, are you already really good at the game and in a position to travel, so you have the thousands of dollars it usually costs to travel? Okay, you get rewarded for that, and now you have stronger cards that can keep you going up, and it's just kind of separating the haves and
Mhm.
have-nots even more than like trading card games already do that, right? Like they're already, you if you want to have a lot of cards, you do have to invest money no matter what game you're playing. So I think that just makes it exponentially worse, and I would rather LSS just not do it in general.
Yeah, fair. I mean, absolutely fair enough. I agree. But then the next add-on to that is it a slippery slope then that they have started doing this for one format and not the other? Because you kind of spoke to Pokemon there for a second about how they did it for
Mhm.
one format and not the other. So is it now that they've demonstrated they can do it in one, do you think it'll start slipping in the other? I think probably not, but still.
I don't think it will. I think they're just going to stick to how they're doing it now, where like the unofficial formats. I mean, I know there's UPF events and that, but I think also they're intentionally designing a lot of these heroes and then the other promos to go along with them, like the weapons and such. They're not busted by any means. Like they're making them very much like a more fun type of hero to play, where they're not like insanely powerful. Although I don't know, Therian. Is it Therian? I think it's like when something's destroyed, you can like pay two or whatever and destroy something your opponent. So it's actually like
That's
it's
pretty
actually
good.
pretty good if they start phantasm popping your stuff, right? But um so I don't know. I think for me, as long as it's within the casual sphere, where again, as I said, I think it's perfectly fine. Like if you let's say in 2 years from now, Therian will probably be like a $300-400 card just because it's only going to be out for so long, and after some time passes, like there's going to be very few of them. It'll be a desirable promo. Um, I think it's perfectly fine to say it's the hero. Like most heroes are tokens, just proxy up a nice version and play that. People already get card alters, or they'll buy like some fan made art or a proxy of a hero token just because it looks nice. Like they get ones where it's like a full art because they don't want to spend like $1,000 for the ones that come from history pack, or it's for a newer hero that just doesn't have a full art. So I think it's for me, I'm perfectly fine if somebody wants to proxy up a York and a Hummingbird so they don't have to drop $600 or whatever it is just to play, a fun casual game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And you know that I know you play Commander, right? I know you do
Mhm.
because you've talked about it on your channel. So Commander players generally don't really care about proxies all in all, right?
Not usually, no.
Yeah.
Especially now as the game's getting more expensive. Even so, I had only real cards for like 9.5 out of my like 10 years of playing Magic. Near the end, my friends and I finally decided, like, you know what? We were getting kind of tired of it, but we just realized like we should just make some nice looking proxies off of like a proxy website. And that's what I did. I ordered like 400 of them, and we just went ham. We were like, you know what? And we can just start selling these cards to get some of the money back because it's just at some point
You mean
when you're
the
playing.
real cards, not the proxies, right?
Yeah, the real cards. Yeah, I don't sell proxies. I got them specifically made where it wasn't even like real art, or it was blown up and the backs were like completely different. They weren't like real. I'm not trying to make fake, cards to sell or something. But no, I just, yeah, because when you're playing casually, for me personally, I really don't care. I don't really like when people just put like slips of paper. It's like if you're unless you're planning on buying the card or you already own it, but it's in another deck and you just don't want to like move it over like a Fabled or something. Um, I don't really like the idea of like I'm just gonna put a piece of paper and put it in a sleeve and then that's my card. And it's like, okay, if you're never planning on buying it, then maybe, you shouldn't be doing that. At least like go out of your way to make a nice proxy. Spend a little bit, trying to get some nice like an actual card at least. Um, but for the most part, I don't know. I'm not really all that concerned about casual formats.
Yeah, fair enough. So I think as we expand into what are we calling it? Player versus environment, right? That's supposedly going to be the new way to bring in a lot of folks. One of the things I've talked about on a previous video I did has how I think that that's targeting a very different population than we're used to. I think it'll almost be targeting like the board gamer population, I think is the way to think about it. So, how well do you think that these unique game pieces will translate into the board gamer population that is used to basically getting everything and having access to everything?
That is actually a very good question. Um, I think I think there are going to be some board game type players who won't play PvE specifically because they don't like the TCG model attached to it. Which I think is perfectly fair. I
Mm-hmm.
actually don't think that, I almost feel sometimes there's this weird conception that like Flesh and Blood needs to change to cater to certain people, whereas I actually think that it's like, no, they have their target audience and not everybody is going to fall within that target audience, which is fine. Like if it's just not your thing, you don't like the TCG model, that's why you play board games, it might not appeal to you. However, I think the one benefit though is the fact that it's going to be a social thing where you're probably going to have at least one person in that group who's like leading it and is super into Flesh and Blood. Like that's their thing. And so I think they'll be able to bring their cards. Like if I'm bringing a friend who doesn't really play the game in, I will literally give them a deck and I will be like, here's the legendaries for it. You can't have them, but you can use them anytime we're playing because you're going to be all getting together to play anyways for that. So I think that will help a lot. And then also, if you're at the kitchen table and you're just playing at home with your friends, you're doing PvE, certain promos, you could just proxy them. Like it's who cares? You're playing PvE. You don't want to drop, hundreds of dollars just to play a specific hero because of the promo itself is the only accessible version. I really can't see many people, being upset about that.
Yeah, I think that's fair as well. So if I'm kind of hearing the conclusion that we're coming to here, it's more that these cards are viewed as collector's pieces instead of game pieces.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on it. All right, so let's talk a bit about the judge promos. Actually, this last weekend was Singapore, and we saw our first look at the judge packs that have been released, which have those unique promos. And I just want to throw it out there going into this discussion, right? I'm not going to speak for Wes, right? But I personally, I am not saying that we don't want the judges to get prizes. That's not, if that's what you're taking from any part of this, that's not as intended, and it's me misspeaking. But I am asking if the unique game pieces being a part of the judge promos, do we think that's an issue versus like the cold foil pummel and the cold foil arclight sentinel and stuff that we've seen? That is awesome. I think having that go into the judges is awesome. I do question if the unique game pieces going to the judges for being part of event. I question if that's um, well, what do you? I guess what do you think on it?
Um, the part of me that would really like a Therian and not have to spend a ton of money on it would like for the promo to be a bit more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think like personally for me, I've come to terms with card games ages and ages ago where it's like I've just accepted that I'm not going to have everything that I want. And so, because there's also exclusive promos in all sorts of other ways rather than even just judges. Because if we're going to talk about judges getting exclusive promos, then we have to talk about creators getting the good deeds or the Herald promos that they did. We have to
Mm,
talk about
that's fair.
stores like Star City Games who have the Eloquence token, right? Which I know is also a topic people mention. I think my opinion is that I'm fine with exclusive promos being given in certain ways because there are also promos that are exclusive. Again, like we said, going to events or even winning events. The only way to get those gold foils is to top an event or buy one on the secondary market. I think as long as it's more evenly distributed, so it's more fair. Like if the one thing I really commend LSS for is that they're bringing back buy a box promos, which stores already get armory promos and that to help support running events. But I think it's cool that if Team Covenant and Star City Games are going to get their own promos, that LGS is also going to buy a box promo. So it incentivizes you to purchase product from different stores, and then that's where you get those exclusive promos. So I'm okay with them doing it, even for judges, as long as it's kind of an across the board thing. Everybody kind of gets their own special thing here and there, to kind of incentivize helping out everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to be clear here, right? I think the judge pack thing is awesome. I really love
Mhm.
the concept of having unique promos but unique promos like again, cold foil,
Of
pummel,
existing
whatever,
cards.
that they only have. The question I just had was on those unique game pieces, right? Because even like
Mhm.
the Star City Eloquence promo, like one would assume that we're going to see an Eloquence token that everyone has access
Sure.
to. So I do think that there's a difference there, but and yeah, we're peeling the onion apart. About the store unique promo things, the and even the play mats, right? That's a what was it? Was it Star City that got the cool Flick Knives mat and they got the cool Leave No
Mhm.
Witnesses mat? So you were that. I mean, we had people from our LGS who bought from them instead of our LGS because it was actually cheaper than buying from the LGS, and they got a play mat. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
question that business practice for sure, but
Hmm.
it's maybe a
Yeah,
different
it's
topic.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. So I guess, yeah, going to the originals, I guess the only one that fits that then is the creator promos, like the good deeds don't go unnoticed. That was a exclusive creator promo. So um yeah, I think ultimately from like just a feeling perspective, I do prefer the because Magic does this too with their judge promos are always special versions of existing cards. And I do I think I do prefer that method personally. However, I am still okay with the fact that they make him exclusive to being a judge or to creators in that. Again, as long as it's only for the social formats, it's not for competitive play. Because the moment you put that gatekeeping on competitive play, that's where it's the problem begins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I mean, you actually have a really solid point on the no deeds. I got some as well. I given them to folks at my locals and my DC
Mhm.
team folks, and I didn't even really register that. So pot calling kettle, I suppose, a little bit in that situation. So fair enough. Yeah,
Well, I mean, I think you're
that's
just
really interesting.
yeah, I think you're just questioning it anyways. It's not like you've really got like a determining factor. We're not sitting here and demanding that judges lose their promos. It's just kind of going over and pondering the idea of like what's the good and bad about this because I think these are the kind of conversations that should be held to kind of come to terms with certain things or just decide whether something's worth being worried about or not.
Yeah, yeah. And disclaimer: I do have a Therian because I got one for the RTN that I judged at. Right, so
Oh, nice.
I'm not throwing stones just because I don't have one.
Mhm.
So we've got a little bit of extra time. If you don't mind, we kind of went into the cost of FaB discussion, and that's something that's been talked about quite a bit. And I want to still stay within the realm of the discussion. So what do you see the appropriate entry for a social format to be? Do you believe that to be higher or lower than someone who's looking to get into a like the competitive form? And by competitive format, I don't mean like win worlds. I mean someone showing up to their armory
And having a
versus
chance.
right. So let me rephrase the question. Do you, from your experience in Commander, right? If someone gets into Commander, are they willing to spend more or less than if they were to pick up, like, say, a standard deck at FNM?
Are they willing to spend more or less? I don't think that question has anything to do with the formats. I think it actually has way more to do with the player themselves. So I have known competitive players who like they'll play modern or command or standard, but they'll build one deck and then that's all they spend their money on. And you would think that and then you've also seen, modern players or even in FaB CC players who will spend thousands on a deck. They'll bling it out and then they'll build like three others because they just love the game. They get so into it. And then in Magic, especially, I was a commander player who had 10 different decks, and one of them, a couple of them were worth like one was like 3,000, the other was worth a couple thousand, and they were all pretty expensive. You play a game for 10 years and you're just going to eventually own a ton of expensive cards, as well as, I was buying and spending thousands on the game. And then it's kind of the same with like social formats like UPF and Flesh and Blood. Like I also have some very expensive UPF decks, and I bought cards specifically for the format. And so I think it's just a matter of how. I think when we say casual, it makes people think that the person's just not that into the game. That's why I also agree with maybe losing the term casual because there are hardcore social players for
Mm-hmm.
for these games. Like commander players can be some of the most insane people you've ever met, and they will fully bling out every deck they have. So I don't think it's really up to the format. I think it's just up to the person and how into the game they get.
Sure, sure. Yeah, and actually, I realized as you were talking, that's actually a bad analogy with Magic because they have rotation, whereas in
Mhm.
their competitive format, well, one of their competitive formats, they have rotation, whereas we don't face that to the same degree. So that's actually not a
Yeah.
completely fair analogy. Because to your point on the commander decks, right? It's an evergreen format. So yeah, eventually you're collect a card, and all of a sudden you've got a $3,000 deck. So I think it's a really fair point. Yeah, where I was going on that is just if someone getting into that casual format, that type of person who would be attracted to that, if you think by and large that they're willing to go a little more in than something. But yeah, I don't know actually where I was going with that. That's a that's a fair point because it wasn't a fair metaphor. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the one thing to maintain though is that social formats need to also have the lowest barrier to entry,
Mm-hmm.
which is why I actually think UPF is decent because you can sit down with a Blitz precon and actually possibly win because of the social nature of the game. Like people will leave you alone because it's like, oh, you're just playing a Blitz precon. Like we're not going to pick on you because you just don't have as powerful of a deck, and because of the social politics, like you literally can win with like the worst deck at the table. It's very much possible. Um, so I think that the barrier to entry needs to be low, much lower than competitive. I'm actually fine with like the top tiers of competitive play having a high, barrier to entry, specifically because like as we mentioned earlier, if you want to go compete at like be a high competitive level player, you have to travel for it. You're already going to be spending thousands of dollars. So the cards having value actually kind of helps you to pay for that cost because as you acquire these cards, you can then sell them to fund continuing to compete. But at the same time, when you're starting to get priced out of even competing at the armory level, that becomes a problem in and of itself too. But that's obviously like a whole other conversation.
Right. Yeah, and then I think to kind of wrap us back up or wrap us back around here, right? To your point, the gold foils can sell for a lot of money, but it's not something that you need at your armory, right? It's not something that you need to show up and compete. And I'm a huge fan of the current model and just looking in terms of the competitive play. And I was just curious what your take was overall on that being for this Flesh and Blood social format, which as Flesh and Blood continues to, I'm not going to say grow, but expand. How's that? As it continues to expand, we will pull in more and more folks who are attracted to the social or the future PvE format and how that will affect them. Well, do you have any closing thoughts of this or anything else you wanted to talk about real quick?
Um, I think we covered everything pretty good. Again, I guess I want to reiterate. I know that it's rough when you're on the internet and you're seeing, especially when you watch some of the bigger YouTubers, or not bigger, but even just like the guys who have a lot of money to throw at the game or like high up players. You see, it makes you perceive that people have a lot more and that you should have that same amount. And so I think there's something to note, to just kind of be mindful when you're watching stuff online, like when you see everybody having stuff that you don't have, it makes you want it even more because you want to fit in, you want to be social. But I think the reality is like most players don't have even like actually most players don't even have a fully tuned deck. I've done polls on my YouTube channel and like more than half of people said, yeah, I don't even have a single deck that's fully tuned. So I think it's kind of important to note that you're not the only one who doesn't have these exclusive items. Most of us don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even all the game pieces. I personally I don't own a single Codex of Frailty, so that's been hurting me on my assassin side, right? So
Mhm. I don't have premeditate, so Lexi's a no-go for me.
yeah, fair enough. Oh, and she's good. And I did see that there's 3x Oldhams in the Singapore calling at least right now. So
Mhm.
that's see if you can get some
Can't
more
wait for
points,
him
I
to go.
suppose. Oh, me too, brother. Me too. All
Yeah.
right, my friend. Well, I want to thank you for taking time out of your Sunday to come chat with me and us here. Could you once again kind of remind everyone where to come find you? Give any shout outs you wanted to give?
Yeah, if you want to just SloopDoop, it'll probably be in the. I think you have it on the thumbnail that you sent me. You've got my name on there, so that's just the channel that you can find me on, and that's my main channel, which then links to my podcast if you want to listen to me ramble on even more about other stuff. But yeah, no, thank you for having me on. This was a wonderful chat.
Yeah, great. Well, again, I want to thank you for coming, and for those of you who have not found him, his stuff's very entertaining. They have the Chad cast as well, which is good. They're like longer format. Some of them like an hour and a half, even push in like 2 hours, I think, of some of them. So that's set on in the background and listen to type of stuff. So, and then are you going to be at any events in the near future where people can come find you in person?
September, I'll be at Canadian Nats. The owner of the store actually asked me to run a UPF event, so apparently I'm going to be running an event for the first time. But other than that, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to make it to Worlds, so because that's very expensive, and unfortunately, the inflation in the country I live in is getting incredibly bad, so things are just getting tighter and tighter for the paychecks. But I might be at Worlds. I don't know. Might be able to swing it. We'll see.
Well, hopefully you can make it. I was able to meet you at previous
Mhm.
Worlds in November, so that was pretty cool to high five and take my picture. So you can do the same with him as well. Well, again, I really want to thank you for taking the time and having this chat, and I'd love to have you back on in the future if that's something you'd like to do. So
Absolutely.
great. Well, thank you everyone for watching us. Again, make sure to like, subscribe, do all that stuff. Hopefully you've been commenting as we've been going to kind of let us know your feedback and start the conversation. And again, thank you for watching. And if nothing else, my friends, say it with me. Go Commando.
Go Commando.